Welcome to X-Tales. Neighbor calls cops when I sunbathe by my pool, accuses me of being homeless. I suppose if I were to summarize my life in Kent, it would be this: a quiet man, a quiet house, a quiet neighborhood. I'm Keith, 54 years old, and I've lived here for more than 3 decades. My home isn't anything flashy, just a simple 3-bedroom, 1-story house nestled on a street lined with similar homes. The kind of place you can get lost in if you don't pay attention to the details. I moved here in the early 90s, just after the property market crash. Back then, prices were all over the place, and I, like many others, found a deal I couldn't resist. I didn't expect much more than a roof over my head at first, but over the years, this little corner of Kent became my sanctuary. The house has a few quirks, a creaky floorboard or two, but the thing I'm most proud of is my garden. It's not a sprawling estate, just a neat backyard with a few vegetable beds and roses I spent countless hours tending. There's a small pool, too, one of those above-ground types. It's nothing fancy, but on a hot summer day, it's all I need. I've got my rhythm. I wake up early, water the plants, grab a cup of coffee, and just sit there in the quiet, watching the birds fly by. The neighborhood has always been peaceful. No drama, no noise, no unnecessary interruptions. My neighbors are friendly enough, but we all keep to ourselves for the most part. I'm not one for crowds or big social events, just enough to wave and say hello when I'm out for a walk or at the local pub for a pint. Life, for the most part, had a soothing rhythm, a rhythm that until recently was completely uninterrupted. But of course, life has a way of shaking things up when you least expect it. It was a typical Tuesday morning when I noticed the moving vans. They were parked in front of the house next door, an older home that had been empty for a few years now. The previous owners, a sweet elderly couple, had moved to a retirement village not far from here. I'd always imagined that place would be the next to go on the market. It wasn't anything special, a little worn around the edges, but it had that rustic charm that people seem to like these days. I didn't think much of it at first. New people move in all the time. But something about the way the vans pulled up made me curious. It wasn't the usual couple or family. No, this was something different. I was tending to my roses when I saw her. She stepped out of the van and into the sunlight, tall and striking, her strawberry blonde hair shimmering against the bright blue sky. She was dressed impeccably, far more so than anyone I've ever seen move into the neighborhood. A tight-fitting suit jacket, sleek trousers, and heels that clicked sharply on the pavement as she stepped towards the front door. I couldn't help but notice her, though I tried not to stare. It wasn't every day you saw someone like her around here. She had that kind of air about her, the kind that suggested she wasn't used to being part of the crowd, the kind that makes you wonder if she belongs here or if she's just passing through. I figured I'd go over, introduce myself, and offer a friendly greeting. I'm a firm believer in community, after all, and why not? A quiet neighborhood should at least have the decency to welcome newcomers. I dusted off my hands, brushed the dirt off my knees, and made my way over to her house. "Hello there," I called out, stepping onto her driveway, hoping to sound more welcoming than awkward. "I'm Keith. I live next door. Just wanted to say hi and welcome you to the neighborhood." She turned around, her eyes assessing me for a moment before she gave a half smile. "Oh, hi," she replied, her voice sharp but not unfriendly. "Thanks, I guess." I hesitated, trying to push past the awkwardness. "I've been in the area for quite a while. If you need anything, just let me know." "Everyone around here is friendly enough." She blinked, looking me up and down as though I were some sort of curiosity. "Right," she said almost absent-mindedly. Then she paused, glancing over her shoulder before adding, "I'm sure I'll be fine. I don't really have anything on me, you know." I blinked, taken aback by the odd comment. I wasn't sure what to make of it. "Oh no, I didn't mean it like that. I meant if you need help with the move or anything. I'm just next door." She waved her hand dismissively, a strange kind of air about her now. "Thanks, but no thanks," she said curtly, as though that was the last thing she wanted. And with that, she turned her attention back to the moving boxes. I stood there for a second, slightly dumbfounded. The conversation had gone so differently than I expected. Most people around here are friendly, even if they're a bit reserved, but she wasn't unfriendly, but there was something off, something unsettling. I wondered if she was just nervous about the new place. It's not uncommon to feel a bit out of sorts when you're moving into a new neighborhood. I chalked it up to that and turned to head back to my garden, but as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning. The next few weeks passed without much fanfare. My life, as it tends to do, settled back into its usual rhythm. The heat wave hit soon after. Shirley, I had learned her name from the mailman who had to deliver a few misplaced packages, and the summer sun made everything a bit more intense. The pool beckoned. I found myself spending most of my days lounging by the water, a cold drink in hand, soaking up the sun. There's something about the heat that makes you feel like everything's slower, more relaxed. People around here seem to come out of hiding during the summer, except Shirley. She never really came outside. I could see her sometimes through the window of her house, walking around or chatting with movers and contractors, but she didn't seem the type to enjoy the peacefulness of the neighborhood. Or maybe she was just too busy. It was hard. To say what I did notice was the way she kept to herself. It was as if she was building a wall, brick by brick, around her life. And yet, despite the barrier she put up, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't quite right. I didn't want to make judgments too quickly, but my gut told me that there was more to her arrival than simply being a new neighbor. But that's the thing about small towns, isn't it? Everyone knows everyone else's business, or at least thinks they do. And when you live in a quiet place like Kent, you get used to the calm. You get used to life moving slowly, with no surprises, no drama. At least that's what I thought. Before I knew it, the calm was about to break. It was one of those rare moments in life when everything seems to be going perfectly, only to be interrupted by something completely unexpected. The heat wave was still hanging in the air, but I had managed to get a good stretch of time by the pool. The sound of birds and the gentle rustling of the trees were the only things I could hear, making the world outside feel miles away. I was fully content in my small slice of paradise when the peace was shattered. A sharp knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I assumed it was probably one of the neighbors, or perhaps even a delivery. But when I opened the door, I wasn't met with the usual friendly face. Instead, I found two constables standing on my doorstep, their uniforms sharp and their faces unreadable. "Good afternoon, sir," one of them said, stepping forward as I instinctively stepped back. "We're here to investigate a disturbance. We've had some complaints about noise coming from this residence." I blinked, trying to make sense of it. "No," I repeated, unsure whether I had heard them correctly. The last thing I wanted was to get into a confrontation with the police, but I was taken aback. I was sitting by the pool in the middle of the afternoon, listening to nothing more than the hum of the countryside. There must be some mistake. "I've been here in the garden all day. I haven't heard anything out of the ordinary." The officer glanced down at a piece of paper in his hand. "We've had reports of someone making noise, and it seems this is the address associated with the disturbance. Can we come in and take a look?" I felt a sense of unease creeping over me. This was absurd. I had lived here for decades, and the last time I had heard of any issues like this was years ago. Still, I wasn't about to make a scene. "Sure, I'll show you around," I said, stepping aside. They followed me into the house, their eyes scanning the interior like they were searching for something. I knew there was nothing to find, of course. This was just a misunderstanding. Still, I couldn't help but feel the tension rising in my chest. I led them into the living room and gestured around. "As you can see, everything's in order. I haven't made any noise." The officers seemed satisfied with my explanation, but I still pressed further. One of them, a taller officer with a stern face, asked, "Can you prove that you live here?" It felt like an odd request, but I didn't hesitate. I quickly grabbed a few utility bills from a drawer and handed them over. The water bill had my name and address clearly printed on it. "All right, Mr. Keith. It seems there's no issue here." Just as I thought the situation was coming to a close, I noticed the two constables move past the window, walking towards the end of my driveway. I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't the end. Before I could say anything, I heard a sharp, angry voice from Shirley's side of the fence. "Do something about him!" she yelled, and I could feel her words reaching me through the walls. "Why are you letting him stay here? He doesn't even belong in this neighborhood." The constables stopped in their tracks. I could hear her continuing, her words sharp and venomous. "He's a homeless migrant, for God's sake! A threat to our peaceful little village!" I felt my face grow hot. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Shirley had gone from a cold neighbor to outright hostile in a matter of days, but this was something else entirely. She had just accused me, a man who had lived here for over 30 years, of being a homeless migrant. The officers were quiet for a moment, but I could tell they were uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. I stood at the door, unable to move, but I was trying to keep my cool. Arguing with her would only escalate things. "Excuse me," I said, stepping outside cautiously. "I don't know what this is about, but I've lived here for decades. You've met me already, Shirley, and I'm certainly not what you're accusing me of." Shirley's eyes flared with disdain as she turned toward me. "Oh, look at you," she sneered. "Don't play innocent. We all know what you are. You're just a beggar trying to take advantage of this nice village. We have no room for people like you, Keith." I could feel my blood start to boil, but I kept my voice steady. "Shirley," I said, forcing the words out calmly. "I don't know what kind of problems you're dealing with, but I don't deserve to be treated this way. You've only been here for a few weeks, and already you're trying to tear apart everything this neighborhood stands for." The officers exchanged glances again. Finally, the taller constable spoke. "All right, Mr. Keith, we've checked things out. We'll leave you to it. Ma'am, we'd suggest you take a step back." Shirley opened her mouth to argue, but the officer cut her off with a firm gesture. "Ma'am," he repeated. With that, they turned and walked back to their vehicle, leaving me standing there, seething in disbelief. Shirley, of course, had one last jab for me. "You won't get away with this, Keith. This isn't over." I watched the constables drive off, their patrol car slowly disappearing down the road. The silence that followed felt deafening. I wondered what the hell had just happened and, more importantly, what did Shirley want from me? This was no simple neighborly dispute anymore. This was something far more dangerous, and it wasn't going away. At first, I thought Shirley's threats were just empty words. After all, she was new to the village, and surely people wouldn't believe someone who barely knew the community. I underestimated her determination and her willingness to twist reality. The rumors began subtly, just whispers at first. One of the shopkeepers at the local grocery store, who had always been friendly, gave me a look of pity as she handed me my change. "Hope everything's all right," she said in a way that sounded more like a statement than a question. When I asked her what she meant, she only shook her head and muttered something about things going around. It wasn't long before I found out what things she meant. Shirley was spreading the most absurd lies about me, claiming I was nosy, dirty, and a troublemaker. She told anyone who would listen that I had been sneaking around her property at odd hours and that I made the neighborhood unsafe. It was laughable, except people were starting to believe her. Her campaign escalated quickly. One morning, as I was pulling weeds in the garden, I noticed Shirley standing at the edge of my property, holding her phone up like a paparazzo on a mission. She snapped photo after photo of my house, muttering under her breath. I stood up and called out to her, "Shirley, what are you doing?" She didn't even flinch, just waved her phone in my direction. "Collecting evidence," she said with a smirk before sauntering off. I thought that was bad enough, but it wasn't until I returned from an afternoon trip to the hardware store that I realized how far she was willing to go. She had taken it upon herself to print out the photos she had taken of my house, grainy, unflattering shots of my garden, the pool, and even through my windows, and plastered them all over the village. I found one of the posters stuck to a telephone pole near the post office. It was a grainy photo of me bent over my vegetable bed with the caption, "Does this man make you feel safe? Demand a safer neighborhood." Below it was a link to a petition Shirley had started calling for me to be removed from the community. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. It was one thing to badmouth me behind closed doors, but this was public humiliation on a scale I'd never experienced. Worse, it was working. I noticed a shift in how people treated me. Neighbors I'd shared small talk with for years suddenly crossed the street to avoid me. Some even looked at me with open disdain. Still, not everyone bought into Shirley's lies. A few neighbors, those who'd known me for decades, offered words of encouragement. "Don't let her get to you, Keith," my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Turner, said one evening as we chatted over the fence. "We know you're a good man. That woman's just looking for trouble, but the support of a few kind souls wasn't enough to stave off the growing pressure. It felt like Shirley was everywhere, poisoning the air with her lies. Every time I left the house, I half expected to see another poster or overhear another whisper. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to rise above it, but the stress was beginning to take its toll. I wasn't sleeping well, and every little noise outside made me jumpy. The breaking point came one evening when I discovered Shirley lurking in my garden. I'd been inside reading when I heard rustling near the back fence. Peeking out the window, I saw her crouch near my rose bushes, her phone in hand. I stormed outside. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She stood up, unbothered by my anger. "Just documenting the state of your property," she said with a smug grin. "The parish council will want to see this." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay composed. "You're trespassing. Get off my property now." She laughed. "Oh, Keith, don't be so dramatic. I'm doing this for the good of the neighborhood." That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't going to let her continue this smear campaign unchecked. The next morning, I called a solicitor. The solicitor was sympathetic but cautious. "Harassment and defamation cases can be tricky," she said. "You'll need solid evidence, photos, videos, anything that proves her behavior has crossed a line." So I got to work. A kind neighbor, Mr. Patel, offered to help. He had a CCTV camera on the side of his house that overlooked part of my property. Together, we reviewed the footage and found several clips of Shirley sneaking around, taking photos and videos through my windows. One clip even caught her pulling a branch off one of my rose bushes, presumably to make the garden look unkempt in her photos. I also managed to get a copy of the police report from the first incident when the constables visited my home. It clearly stated that there was no evidence of any disturbance or wrongdoing on my part. Mrs. Turner, bless her heart, offered to write a statement detailing the ways Shirley had tried to turn the neighbors against me. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "That woman's a menace." Armed with this evidence, I felt a small glimmer of hope. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control over the situation. The solicitor helped me draft a formal complaint against Shirley, outlining her harassment and defamatory actions. We filed it with the local magistrate's court along with the evidence I'd gathered. It wasn't an easy decision to make. Taking legal action meant exposing myself to even more scrutiny, but I knew it was the only way to put an end to her campaign of harassment. The petition she started, the posters, the photos, it all added up to a clear case of defamation. The trespassing incidents, backed by the CCTV footage, further solidified the harassment claim. My solicitor assured me that we had a strong case. When the court summons was served, I saw Shirley's smug demeanor. Falter for the first time, she still tried to play the victim, of course, claiming I was bullying her for standing up for the neighborhood. But the evidence was irrefutable, and deep down, I think she knew it. As the days passed, I started to feel a sense of relief. The legal process would take time, but I'd done what I could to protect myself and reclaim my reputation. Shirley's lies had caused immeasurable stress, but I wasn't going to let her win. For the first time in weeks, I sat by my pool, sipping a cold drink and listening to the birds. The calm wasn't fully restored yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Little did I know, the storm wasn't entirely over. The day of the hearing arrived, and while I'd been assured by my solicitor that we had a strong case, I couldn't help but feel nervous. Shirley, on the other hand, walked into the magistrate's court with the same air of confidence she'd carried since the day she moved in. She wasn't smiling, but her smugness was written all over her face. I could tell she thought she'd somehow wriggle her way out of this. The hearing began with my solicitor presenting the evidence. The CCTV footage showed Shirley trespassing on my property multiple times, peering through my windows, and even tampering with my garden to make it look worse in photos. The police report from the first incident was clear. There was no disturbance caused by me, only unfounded complaints from Shirley. Witness statements from neighbors like Mrs. Turner and Mr. Patel further solidified the truth. Shirley had been lying and harassing me relentlessly. When it was Shirley's turn to speak, her tone was dripping with self-righteousness. She claimed she'd been acting in the best interest of the community, protecting the village from a supposed threat. But her arguments fell apart under scrutiny. The magistrate, a stern woman who clearly had no patience for nonsense, pointed out the lack of evidence supporting Shirley's claims. Instead, the magistrate focused on the harm Shirley's actions had caused me: public humiliation, emotional distress, and damage to my reputation. By the end of the hearing, Shirley's confidence had visibly deflated. The magistrate ruled in my favor, issuing Shirley an antisocial behavior order, ASBO, that prohibited her from approaching me, my property, or spreading further defamatory claims. Additionally, Shirley was ordered to pay damages for defamation and to cover my legal fees. The magistrate made it clear that any violation of the ASBO would result in immediate legal consequences, including potential criminal charges. Shirley left the court in silence, her earlier bravado completely gone. A few days after the ruling, the constables returned to enforce the court's orders. I saw them approach Shirley's house from my garden, and though I couldn't hear the conversation, her reaction was unmistakable. Her eyes widened, and she began gesturing wildly, clearly trying to argue her case, but the constable stopped her. Firm handing her a formal notice to comply with the court's ruling, she was given a deadline to remove all the defamatory posters she'd plastered around the village. One by one, she grudgingly took them down, her face flushed with embarrassment as villagers watched. It was a small victory, but seeing her finally held accountable for her actions felt like a weight lifting off my chest. News of the court's decision spread quickly through the village. The posters were gone, but the damage Shirley had done to her own reputation was irreversible. People began to avoid her entirely at the local market. I overheard a shopkeeper telling another customer, "She's lucky she's not in jail after what she did to Keith." Neighbors who'd once been swayed by her lies came to apologize. Shirley, meanwhile, became a ghost in the community. She stopped attending events and avoided the main streets whenever possible. On the rare occasions I saw her, she kept her head down, her former arrogance replaced by an air of defeat. With Shirley's harassment finally behind me, I began to feel like myself again. My garden, once a source of anxiety with her constant intrusions, became a place of solace once more. I found joy in the simple things: pruning my roses, swimming in the pool, and chatting with the neighbors who'd stood by me.